Hi folks, you're with Tasteless today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about something that some folks are getting in a real lather about, which is high sexual partner body count. So, is someone who's had a high body count, gazillions of sexual partners, does that devalue them as a long-term partner? Are they, if they've lived that sort of life, are they unable to make commitments that are lasting? And would they forever be duplicitous? Are they incapable of monogamy? And with the whole idea of a chaste, loving, intimate relationship with one person, would that be beyond their capacity? The difference between, like, if a woman has had a lot of partners, does that make her a slut, or him a slut for that matter? So these issues have been going around, and they seem to excite the normal sort of social justice type passions that people that are slut shamed, particularly if it's women, are thus suddenly a victim class or an oppressed class, which requires a vigorous fight back response to accuse anyone that may say that you're all Nazis and Hitler and so on. So anyway, so having a look at that, I was sort of thinking, I can't understand what the big deal's about, but then, I haven't personally lived a huge high body count lifestyle. I don't know what would classify as a high body count, like in a lifetime or whatever. But we need to think about this idea of marriage being a union between two people, and one that's ordained sort of by the church with much solemnity, by the way, celebration, but also solemnity. And with it comes responsibilities and obligations to the other. Now, this is, of course, a change. The time when this sort of marriage was considered and conceived, and one that was, I think, pretty much universally, well, in certain areas at least, universally accepted. The need for partners to cooperate in not only procreation and children, but in working, particularly where it's subsistence or near subsistence or an agricultural lifestyle. You had to be out there doing the work, planting your crops at the right time, bringing in the harvest, and doing everything you could to ensure the survival of you and your partner, and of course your offspring. So the idea of cooperation, shared resources, shared effort, and so on were very necessary just to survive. And a marriage was a good way of doing this. You're more likely to put time and effort and invest in your own offspring than you are in someone else's, and that's hardly a revelation. Also, people got married very young. The idea, as soon as women began to, or younger girls, began to menstruate, they were considered, they were able to engage in procreation at that point. It seems quite sordid today, but that was around for quite some time, and it wasn't within the last 100 years. Even in Western countries, the age of 13 was considered old enough to get married, to procreate. So in a lot of tribal cultures today, 11 or 12 is considered that, and within African communities where girls at the age of 10 menstruating isn't unusual. I'm surprised and shocked actually at the number, say in black countries, South Africa, or black communities in the US, where 11 and 12-year-olds, black girls, are having children. It seems astonishing to me. And in some cases, there's a 13-year-old girl and her male partner is an 11-year-old boy. And you see this in the islander communities as well around the Pacific, where the idea of monogamy didn't exist. There was a woman was assumed and would be viewed as being unusual or even strange if she did not have multiple male partners. And the same goes for that in various parts of Africa as well, where the idea of a woman having one partner in her lifetime is considered or if not strange, almost idiotic, if not ridiculous. So it's assumed that a woman would have many partners. And again, that's the situation today. So, so when we look in the West at people getting married, and even when in my lifetime, it's not like I'm a million years old or anything, that it was not unusual for girls to get married straight out of high school, or certainly to do some sort of basic, low-tier college course and then get married. So girls getting married at 17, 18. I remember girls getting married at 16. Girls getting married at 19 or 20, that sort of thing was quite usual. It wasn't everybody, but it was quite usual. But times have certainly changed now. There's a lot of women who are 30 and not married, who haven't even had a serious relationship, for goodness sakes. And so obviously, given they're unmarried and they're out dating for a longer period of time, then the likelihood that they'll have far more sexual partners than someone that married at 17 is, of course, obvious. It's quite clear and obvious. Does that mean, therefore, that they're a slut or something, or they're someone who's morally adrift? Or of course it doesn't. It just means they're longer out there, they're dating more and having more dates, and so there's much less expectation of getting married young and committing young, and a much greater expectation that people will stay unmarried for longer, and of course during that time have more intimate partners. Now, a lot of the women I know, through and these are women, say, who are, they were married and they've divorced. Some who haven't married, they talk about, I'm thinking of one now. She's not bad looking and kept herself in quite good condition, and she's sort of pushing 50 now, and she doesn't find it that easy to get dates, and she puts on the quality control sort of glasses and looks, well, I only want a guy who's who ticks the following boxes. She would, she's saying she'd go without getting laid for quite long times, so she has to lower the expectation and say, well, the guy looks hot, even though he might be an idiot or an asshole. He looks hot, so I'll fuck him and that sort of thing. But she finds it quite difficult to, if she said just recently to my wife and I that if she was thinking about selecting men on the basis of a serious relationship with future prospects, she'd struggle to get laid at all. That's in her view, of course. And I don't think her standards or requirements are outrageously high. I think they're certainly towards the more optimistic or upper end, but they're not outrageous. He doesn't have to be Brad Pitt and a multimillionaire and this and that. That sort of thing. She quite accepts someone who would work long hours to make the money to build a future, and I think she's quite realistic in a number of ways. But that's her take on it. Now, what therefore is the what's the point at which one becomes a slut? Is there a measure, like if it's 99 sexual relationships, then you're not a slut. But when you get to 100, you become a slut. Like what is the? I don't know if there's a definition, or at least not one that I can see. There are various studies around I've seen time to time that says that on average people have 10 sexual partners in their lifetime, or 20, or whatever the number is. I can't remember, but it's not a vast number, and I think it relates to circumstances and attitudes rather than morals per se. Now, I knew a lady. This is when I was in my early 20s. She was in her early 20s, and she was a dancer, and very, very good looking lady. Simple. I doubt her IQ was more than 95, if that. But very hot looking, and had great legs, and she never was out of work as a dancer. She seemed to be just doing it all the time. And she would go and work for various traveling music and dancing shows that used to go around Australia and do all sorts of gigs, do gigs at the various places around the city, things like the clubs and so on. And she was never out of work. But we were talking one time, and someone was saying, well, I can't remember her name, but whatever it was, hey, you've fucked a million guys type thing. Usually young people around were all drunk, and she goes, yeah, she's quite, she's not ashamed about it at all, and she explained it something along the lines of, I'm not really that good a dancer. I look okay, but I'm not that good a dancer, and I don't have the motivation or the wherewithal to continually be learning the newest or the latest dance steps and so on. So what I'm good at, bopping to the music and moving around and basic sort of dance steps, and I've got I look really good in a high cut leotard and everything, so I'm going to get work. But because I'm not that good a dancer, I have to fuck the guy who puts together the traveling show. So she would get like a different job every week, sort of thing, or every couple of weeks, and she would always make a point of fucking the guy who was in charge of the show, and some. And I went to one of these things with this girl I was dating at the time, who used to write musical scores for the thing, for the shows, and the guy, she was fucking this particular guy, and I thought, she must be desperate. But in her view, so I said, well, how many? Now, bear in mind, she's like 22 or something, and she shrugs, and she's been dancing since she was 17. She shrugs and says, I don't know, 100 guys, maybe more. And she clearly wasn't counting or anything, but given that in order to get the job and maintain job security for the time of the thing, she would fuck the guys putting together the show. Now, because the shows only lasted for a week or two, she would then have to fuck the next guy and so on. But in her view, it was just sort of sound business practice. And given she was so hot, they were keen to fuck her. And as she saw it, that was an exchange. She added there's other things, like she would, for example, when they were traveling around the rural areas and had to stay in hotels, the guy doing the show would have the nice room, and he'd put the dancers in the caravan park down the road. And so, but he would stay in the nice hotel. So she would get to stay with him, have the nice breakfast in the morning, have the nice shower, and all the facilities. And in return, she only had to, give him a hand job or fuck him or something like that. And that was the deal. And so 100 sexual partners. Would you've sort of said that she was a morally adrift slut or something? I think in her case, I think it was, and I say that now looking back, it was sort of realpolitik. She was responding to the realities of the situation around. Did she need to fuck every guy? Probably not. When you get someone as hot as her on the dance troupe, then I'm sure there was plenty of times she could have got the job based on her looks alone, and kept it for that time. So, but I'm thinking about other men and women that I've known who had high body counts, and whether it was a reflection of their attitudes, their contempt for their fellow human beings, for example, or something else, and also relating to how hot they, did guys want to fuck them, or were they of the view that any man you offer it to will take it, and so you can give it out anytime you want to unattractive men or men that you wouldn't normally consider. So I think it's far more nuanced than just straight body count. I think just straight body count on its own is not per se a measure of slut or no slut, or that sort of a definition being applied. I think it varies based on circumstances and conditions and the person themselves. For example, someone who's stunningly attractive may get a lot more opportunities to have sexual partners than someone who isn't. Having said that, I've hit on some women I thought were very, very attractive, whether they're super sexy type attractive or what, but attractive. And if you're going just on pure looks alone, nothing else, sexuality probably plays a bigger role than say if you know them or you appreciate or admire them. But my sort of experience in that is that sometimes the super hot people, men or women, the super hot people, they actually struggle to get dates because everyone assumes. There was a guy who worked, and he was built like this Greek god, for fuck's sake, and he was perfectly symmetrical in every way. He was like super, he's like 6'2", 6'3". He was super fit, and everything's in proportion, and he looked like he'd been, Michelangelo chiseled him out of the fucking marble or something. And he actually found it quite difficult. And I was stunned he had a good job on good money and everything. I was stunned to see that, or when he mentioned to me that he frequented high class prostitutes. He wanted hot chicks, so he had to pay the big bucks to the high class sort of prostitute places, call girl places, and I was staggered. I thought, gee, a guy looking like you'd have chicks falling over you. And he was, no, it doesn't work that way. And so some of the girls, we had this thing in the office where some of the girls got drunk and they started writing up on the whiteboard, on the marker board, which guys they'd fuck in the office. And I was surprised. I was reasonably young at the time, so I was sort of a bit taken aback. But they started writing it up, and he wasn't on any of the lists. And I, it was some office party about something or other. The company had won some huge contract or some shit. But so I asked us, well, how come what's his face isn't on the list? Given again, he looks like one of those fucking Greek god statues. And they, oh no, we are no, and so the girls took the view that they could never, because he's such a good-looking guy, he would have access to the very top tier of hot-looking chicks. And they figured they could never compete at that level. So because they couldn't compete at that level, they thought, well, no, there's no point in, because we never measure up to the chicks he's already had and the ones that he can get. So we'll be thrown overboard for some girl, some super hot chick, and so we'll be forever, emotionally and mentally scarred. Because we've been dumped by the hot guy, which means we're not hot, which means we're just not players in the big league, and so almost like a defensive act of protection, they decided that they wouldn't date this, even though they all agreed he was a hot looking guy and everything, but they wouldn't do it because they figured they just couldn't compete. So I've noticed this with women. Again, I've dated a couple of, or a few in my view, hot women, and I hit on them, and they, we go out, and you end up talking, and they sort of, I remember one saying that she hadn't got laid for 6 months. I said, what? You've got to be kidding me. But it's not, for my own saying, I've never worried about how many men there've been before with it doesn't worry me, and I take the view that if she wants to be with me, then that's fine, and I accept that I've got a certain approximate value, and that the woman would want to be with me, and that would be the basis for the relationship. And you have to have that trust and confidence in your partner. I mean, this is just a one night thing or something, but otherwise, and you can't have that suspicion and be paranoid about it and be thinking, oh, all the guys or they're all the girls or whatever that came before. So I think you have to put that out of your mind. So I think the slut shaming thing's gone out of all proportion. If someone has a burning desire, they have to fuck a different person every night, and they're clear about that, then that's fine. And that would definitely fall into the slut territory. But especially say people, again, other women I've known that have say gone into the online dating thing, and they have to. It's a numbers game. They have to play the odds of the numbers game, and they have to say, okay, there's going to be a small proportion of these things will work out. So if I like the guy and he looks okay and he's, seems to be, the chemistry's there, I might as well fuck him. If it doesn't work out, then it doesn't work out. And if it does, we'll fine. And I don't see that necessarily as a slut behavior, but rather more the real politic of just the numbers game. So looking at the wider architecture, I suppose, or the wider structure of this whole body count slut shaming thing, I think it plays into people's paranoia, their insecurities, their uncertainties, their defensiveness, and their ability to what they would see would be to win the game. And I think a lot of people are entering into it with the wrong attitude to begin with. And the idea of, for example, here's another woman. She mentions that she fucks a lot of guys, but she's always thinking of a different guy than the guy she's fucking. So she's thinking of, the Hollywood movie star or something like that. So she dreams. It's almost like a form of, I don't know, like a type of masturbation almost, that she's thinking of the super hot Hollywood hunk while she's fucking the ordinary guy. He doesn't know she's thinking of someone else. So she's getting off on the notion that she's really being fucked by, I don't know, Channing Tatum or Brad Pitt or something like that. So I think that's dishonest. And I think that type of dishonesty feeding into intimate partners, would create a high body count and would create the structure of the slut and thus the slut shaming. So it's far more nuanced than just straight slut or not, or it's far more nuanced than that. And I think there's a lot into it. I'll be interested in seeing your comments below. You've been fantastic to stay at your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.